Now, as for the day in COVID, I'll try and make this quick, but let's do the good, the bad and the ugly when it comes to the day in COVID. And while it was a tough day for Sydneysiders being told they have to go for another month, there was a fair amount of good. Apart from the fact that New South Wales is now the only place with lockdowns, Victoria is back to lockdown light, essentially, with a lot of restrictions, but more freedoms. South Australia, well, free and easy, along with Western Australia and also Tasmania, the Northern Territory and Queensland right now. But the most important thing that happened today for people in New South Wales is that finally some people will be able to go back to work. Decisions made by the New South Wales government today say that construction will come back with limited numbers of people on job sites, but the work can't happen if people are living in those job sites. So it's not there for huge home renovation jobs. As for tradies, as long as you don't have contact with people inside a house, so maybe you'd be able to work on things like guttering and fences, you'd be able to clean up yards, that stuff will start again from Saturday. And the same too for a group of people that you know I've talked about a lot, that is the cleaners and the gardeners. They get to go back to work, so don't bitch and moan if you see them. They're allowed to do it as long as they don't have contact with anyone inside a home, a unit or a workplace. Here is that announcement being made today.
We will allow non-occupied construction. No construction activity can or will occur in those 8 local government areas. But outside those 8 local government areas, non-occupied construction, that means construction on premises where nobody is living or staying, can proceed. We will also allow limited activity for what we call contactless tradies. If tradies can come to a premise without having contact with anybody and undertaking work, that will be allowable.
So it means potentially if all the plumber has to do is stay outside, they'll be able to come. If somebody has to fix the fence, they'll be able to do it. If somebody has to fix the roof, they'll be able to do it. This was a good announcement that happened today. Also, you might remember our conversation with Eliza a couple of nights ago, a colleague of mine as part of the News Corp family, and she has been in her home for the best part of 5 weeks as a single woman with no contact with anyone being able to come and visit her at home.
So I have been completely housebound, and short of a trip to the supermarket, I haven't seen a single human being. If I start to think about the prospect of potentially weeks or months ahead of me where this is my reality, it does start to become really distressing.
Well, good news today. After that appeal, the New South Wales government will allow people like Eliza who live by themselves to have one person visit. Now, it's only one person that gets to come and go over the period of the next month. So you can pick whether it's your best mate, you can pick whether it is your mum, you can pick whether it's your son or whatever it happens to be, but that is good news. I know an end of lockdown is the best possible news, but let's hear how that system's going to work.
If you have been or are living by yourself, you are allowed to nominate one person that's allowed to visit you, but it has to be the same person. So it can be a family member, it can be a member of another household, but it has to be one person, and it has to be outside of those 8 local government areas. If you're within those 8 local government areas, it has to be somebody within your local government area or within that 10-kilometre distance.
Also, good news too, that there will be more money coming from the federal government, and New South Wales has stepped up after the constant conversations on this program about the financial support for businesses. Workers now will get what they got under the JobKeeper system last year, up to $750 per week. Now remember, you, the worker, have to apply, the boss doesn't. So any worker of any business, regardless of whether it's a small one or the biggest in town, who has lost up to 20 hours or more of work qualifies. You go to servicesaustralia.gov.au, that's how you do it. If you also get other Centrelink benefits, but you work on top of that, you're going to get an extra $200. Again, servicesaustralia.gov.au, sole tradies, no change, but still $1,000 a week. Again, the better news would be that all of this is over, but more money is coming where it is needed, thanks to a deal done by the Prime Minister today.
The Commonwealth Government has your back, just as we've had the back of Australians all through this crisis.
Now, also important to note is that business support. $10,000 a week was not enough. So it has now been amped quite significantly, where it could be up to $100,000, which is paid to companies all the way up to about $70 million in turnover. So obviously, you're not going to get $100,000 if you're just a small business that's got a couple of $100,000 turnover, but it's a big improvement on the $10,000 number that the New South Wales government was putting in place. So now it's up to $100,000. Now this, again, doesn't save every business, but it helps to protect a lot more businesses than was the case not that long ago. Here is the Prime Minister, again, explaining the details of that scheme, of which you have to apply through the New South Wales government. That's for the bosses.
What we're doing now is faster, it's more effective, it's more targeted, it's getting help where it's needed far more quickly. We're not dealing with a pandemic outbreak across the whole country. When we did JobKeeper, we had to employ it across the whole country, all at once, and we did it for 6 months. What we need now is the focused effort on where the need is right now. And so it can be turned on and off to the extent that we have outbreaks that occur. JobKeeper did not have that flexibility.
Now, Australia is starting to roar when it comes to the vaccine rollout. I know that that's not what Twitter wants to hear, but it is the truth. Could we double this number? And that would be great. You betcha. But right now, total number of doses given for first and second jabs, 11.5 million people have been through the vaccine system. This is an excellent number. We are turning the corner fast. And once you get into things like the 24-hour centre, in my view, with things like AstraZeneca, you're going to get that number up faster and faster every single week. So the Prime Minister is now confident, suggesting we can get this done by Christmas.
Well, I would expect by Christmas we will be seeing a very different Australia to what we're seeing now. What we're seeing overseas is when countries do reach those much higher vaccination rates, then that does give their governments a lot more options in the suppression limitations they have to use to deal with the virus. Lockdowns become a thing of the past when you're at that level.
Now, remember, we're not going to get to 100% vaccination, but the US is effectively reopened with about 55% of people who have been vaccinated. The UK, a little higher, but again, nowhere near where Premier McGowan says 80% of people need to be vaccinated. So yes, at some point, the very people obsessing about zero cases have to understand there will be a limit to how many people will get the vax, and there will have to be a discussion about those that choose not to take it and the consequences of it. But that is something that should be happening by Christmas if sanity prevails. As for the bad, and it is really bad today, is that if you're in Greater Sydney, lockdown goes for another 4 weeks at least.
I will be announcing now that New South Wales will be, or Greater Sydney, will be in lockdown for a further 4 weeks till the 28th of August.
Now, I have a little confession to make. While I'm very aware about how blessed I am to be able to go to work every day, I am also, like many people in Greater Sydney right now, in a lockdown, and I've got to say that I don't know how you did this in Melbourne for 4 months. This is really hard. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I get to work and I've got a pretty good life. But it is tough. Today I deleted Instagram because I'm just really frustrated with the number of people who've got all their photos of how happy they all are. It's tough. And this brings me to the ugly bit. We need to send kids back to school, Premier. Not because I'm bored, not because my kids want to watch Bluey, but because the kids that don't have it as good as my girls are really hurting. How much evidence do we need? Today we learn that kids are stressed, are suicidal, and are turning up in emergency wards after hurting themselves. Please send kids back to school, Premier. Attempted suicide rates in Victoria have soared. The Kids Helpline gave us those statistics. And the bit that breaks my heart is Australian children have been calling the Kids Helpline to report sexual abuse. They are being abused in their homes because they're not going to school. Now, I understand that we've got to take a tough line and we've got to get it as close to zero as possible. But it is unforgivable that we are doing this to our kids, to our grandkids. I understand in the areas where it is really hard and there's a couple of hundred cases. But the facts are the facts, and they have been for the 5 weeks of the lockdown. I know some Year 12 kids will get to go back to school, but they've got to get a jab before they can go back to school and get a test every day in Year 12. But every kid needs to go back to school. You yourself, Premier, said that schools were safe, that the only danger was parents mingling. Then find the ones that mingle, but let everyone else send their kid back to school. And for God's sake, think of the kid that is so desperate after being locked up with their abuser that they are hurting themselves or they are crying out for help. There are other things that matter. The stats are exactly the same tonight as they were yesterday and exactly the same as they were last week. Of the 35 local government areas in New South Wales that are affected by Greater Sydney's lockdown, 27 of the 35 local government areas have 10 or fewer cases. 22 of the 35 local government areas have 5 or less mystery cases. And 9 local government areas have none. For God's sake, let them go back to school and save the kids who are really, really suffering. Because the kids that are really suffering, if they reach out to a teacher, the teacher has to tell the police, has to tell the welfare services. I don't say this because I'm a dad who's bored. I'm not saying this because I'm a dad who's frustrated. I'm not saying it because it's a dad who wants to sleep in later. I'm saying it because this really, really matters. Premier, I will not use the word beg, but I mean it with all my heart.